without limits or judgment. A place for you and people like you to tell your most effed up stories.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Effed Up Stories. I am your host, Will Pender.
And I am your co-host, Ryan Sharp.
And tonight's episode is a little bit of a different episode than the kinds that we've done up to this point. We actually thought it would be kind of fun to answer some questions that, not just any questions, but questions that we've been asked many, many times by many different people. So this episode is a way to kind of answer that for everybody, and I just think it'll be a kind of a fun little episode. So we'll be discussing many different topics, just in a shorter, we'll spend less time on each one. So with that having been said, if you do have any stories on the paranormal, pictures, video, anything like that, you can submit it to us on our site, effedupstories.com. That's EFFEDUPSTORIES.com. And if it's something that we figure we can get enough information on and it tickles us just right, it could end up in a podcast or at least on our website. So with that said, let's start with the first question. I've been asked this by many different people. We did a podcast some time ago with someone named Ari. She had submitted a story, is what spawned this. She basically had a box that was a lot like Jason Haxton's Dibbuk box. It had a strange look to it. It was sealed with wax. She apparently had all these strange things happen to her. And part of the show, I believe, Ryan, you put her on the spot as because this box was, ruining her life. So Ryan offered to take the box off her hands, and during the episode, that's what apparently was going to happen, is that she was going to give us the box. So a lot of people after the fact had asked us, had Ryan gotten the box, and the answer is no. We actually, I gave Ryan her email, they discussed it in email. Ryan, you gave her your address and everything.
Well, we conversed several times back and forth about their concern about whether or not I was aware of what I was getting into, and basically we conversed back and forth with me several times, with me assuring them that I was well aware of the responsibility that I was taking on, and that I was more than willing to take on that responsibility and the consequences that would arise from it. Now that went on for several emails back and forth several times, and then a period of long radio silence. I guess it was a couple of months.
It was a good while. We had kind of forgotten about it, and she had emailed me in what seemed to be like a kind of a panicky email that she was absolutely fed up with what this box was doing to her, and she really wanted to get rid of it. Is what it sounded like. And it was like, if Ryan still wants that box, you know, I'm I want to get rid of it. I don't want to have anything else to do with it. So at which point I
guess we should also add that the supposedly we had lost contact because several of her accounts were hacked or shut down, and she had no access to any of the contact lists where our email were, and eventually she just gave up on all of those and made new email addresses and recontact us again.
So once again, we basically went through, I forwarded Ryan on to her, and they had made plans to get the box, but it just
I
never
sent my address. I even wrote up a little disclaimer stating that I was fully aware that of what I was taking, the responsibility I was taking, and that I wouldn't blame anyone for anything that might occur. And I guess that was the last we heard of them again for a while. And then she got back to us again regarding a different podcast series, I believe. Well, wasn't it a radio show or a different podcast? They were interested in talking to us about, or interested in talking about our part in her story. And again, I tried to get the box to no avail, and that's been it's been several months now, and needless to say, I don't have any expectations of ever seeing the box arrive on my doorstep.
Yeah, so that about sums it up, I guess, in quite a bit of detail. That's exactly what happened. So we don't know if, to me, it just seems like she doesn't want to get rid of it, maybe. Or maybe there's some reason or something that prevented her from it. But I tend to lean towards that she just didn't want to get rid of it, maybe. So that's that question. Another question that we've gotten several times is, have we ever recorded something that didn't actually get into a podcast that was supposed to? And we did. Actually, there's quite a few different things that we've recorded. And I guess sadly for me, we actually did a really good episode one time on, basically
strange disappearances.
Yeah, and I remember Ryan had a really big story on this guy that ended up in this village, and the village had it was like a snowy place, right, Ryan? Like it had they had huskies and stuff like that, but the huskies were all dead.
Oh, you're talking about the village up north in the Yukon.
Yeah, and they still had like the cauldrons over the fires. Everything was set at the dinner tables and stuff. Like it was as if everybody was doing their normal thing, but had just up and vanished with food on the stove. Stuff out, people playing cards, for example, and they could be just left as, in the middle of a game. Everybody just disappeared.
Yeah, so this would have been a village in northern Canada, in the Yukon. It was a village of Aboriginals, and the story comes to us from a trapper who had stopped into the village. It was getting late, and he was out trapping, and decided that he should probably find somewhere to stay for the night. And he went to this known community and found it empty. Not a soul was around. Like you said, it was as if everyone had just picked up and left right in the middle of dinner. The rifles were left leaning up against the tables. There was cauldrons bubbling away as if they were left there unattended. They had bubbled dry, and to the point where they went and got the Mounties, brought the Mounties up there, and that's when they discovered that not only had all the people disappeared from this village, but all the graves had been emptied. And I mean, we're talking northern Canada here, permafrost. is lives up to its name up there. It's pretty permanent, and there they had all these, and I mean I guess from what I read, the traditions, their burial traditions, include piling huge mounds of rocks on top of the graves to keep predators away, because there's a great honor for the dead. Culturally, I guess, amongst the Aboriginal peoples, and it was a great mystery as to how and why all these graves had been emptied, and not only that, but the sled dogs, the teams of sled dogs, and I mean, up there, your sled dogs, that's your life, that's your lifeline. They get you from your hunting areas back home, get your kills. You bring your dead deer home on the back of a sleigh. That's your whole life is your dogs, and so you look after them. And they found all the dogs dead underneath a huge snowbank that had blown up. And apparently they had starved. They had been left there, which was also strange, because anybody who knows anything about wolves and dogs and stuff like that, they can go without food for quite a while. And it didn't seem that the village was vacant for that long. So the amount of time that it would have taken those dogs to starve, I mean, we're talking a week, 2 weeks. I'm not a biologist, but they could live a human can live for 5-6 days without food, or 2 weeks maybe, if not in good shape, but it takes quite a while for something to starve to death, and it didn't seem to line up. And then there was other stories of lights being seen in the sky, so it was a great mystery.
And of course, the irony being that that podcast too disappeared, right?
The greatest of ironies, yeah.
Yeah, I really took a deep look into my computer, and I just couldn't find it anywhere. So that was a sad loss, because I really enjoyed the episode, and I don't think
What was even stranger about that whole thing is that I remember I uploaded my portion of the recording, and I don't even think the upload made it to the site, because usually I don't keep too many backups. You got it, I got it, uploaded it to our FTP server, and deleted it from my computer in the morning, only for you to contact me and tell me that you had lost yours. And when we went and looked, my upload was gone as well.
Yeah, so all around it was at least a strange set of coincidences there, and again, it's a bit sad, because I enjoyed the episode, and I believe we even lost our notes and everything that we had to do it, because I did want to do it again, but we just ended up it was almost like starting over, so we just went somewhere else with our next podcast. Another thing that never did make the cut was we did a fan episode at one point, where we had I believe it was 3 different people, 3 or 4 different people on an episode, and each sharing a story. And one of the people that we had on was Gordon Mackey, and we actually had a longer segment with him. It was quite a bit longer than the other people, and we did cover some interesting topics, like what happens to different types of rocks, like quartz and stuff like that have magnetic properties, and how residual hauntings, which is a haunting that plays over and over again, the same scenario. The idea being that these things, around areas that had these rocks with magnetic qualities, could have recorded the event similar, I guess, to the magnetic qualities of a tape.
The energy of a human life can be imprinted upon the crystalline structure inside of certain types of stone, like quartz and stuff like that, I think was the conclusion, or the topic that we were discussing.
Yes, so the idea that you were seeing reruns of an event long past, and we ended up cutting it because it was just a little lopsided to have a really long, discussion with Gordon, and then these, rather shorter, quite a bit shorter stories with our other guests. So we just chose to take his shorter story to put it together. So that's something that never made the cut. That was still an interesting topic. Now, another question that we get quite a bit, and this seems very common, I guess, for anybody who delves into paranormal stuff, is that, what scares you most? And for me, it's an easy answer. It's that, what happens after we die. Because it doesn't matter how confident you are in what you think happens. There's always that root of unknown, what happens. And in the case with dying, you can't take anybody with you. You could blow up a room full of people, but you're still going to have your own experience. And I guess what scares me most is that no matter whether you're, I've read many negative near-death experiences that happen to good people, and by that same token, I've read positive experiences for people who weren't so nice. So it seems to have this randomness to it. It's very, very hard. People who aren't religious still have good experiences, whereas someone who's devoutly religious can have negative experiences. But that's not the rule either. I mean, it's all over the map, basically. And so that's the thing that's scary, especially when you read some very, very negative ones. I've read a lot of different negative ones. Something that doesn't tend to come up a lot in podcasts and stuff like that. I mean, if you really go looking, you'll find it. There's a lot of... it sounds kind of weird to say it, and I can understand why people don't talk about it, but there's a lot of stories of people who are raped by demons and stuff like that. And, I can't really imagine much worse stuff than that. But I mean, all out torture and just really, really humiliating, defiling kind of, the worst kind of things that you can think of actually does happen to a lot of people. Even when they don't seem that bad, it makes you wonder what would happen to someone who's truly, truly evil. And yeah, so
or even a little bit evil,
or even a little bit evil. Yeah, I mean, so that for me, and the experiences are so unique a lot of the time. We hear a lot of the stories of, a tunnel of light and and darkness, but there's a lot of really unique ones. There was this army guy, who his near-death experience, he was in a dark room and crawling over dead bodies, and they were all decayed, and his hands were going through their chest cavities, and it was just organs and stuff everywhere. There was this other one I read where this guy was, they were younger, I guess. I think they were in college, and he had this friend, and he said his friend was these bug eyes. He never understood it because he always thought he was kind of ugly, but he was a ladies' man, and he was always out. They were out drinking, and he always had a different lady. The kind of college life, I guess, everybody wants to have. And one night they were driving on the highway, and they were a little bit cut, and they get in an accident, and he wakes up. And that's where he's to. He's in this hellish place, and he ended up he was more of a spectator, I guess. Whereas his friend, he realized he was dead when he saw his friend there, and that's what was happening to his friend, as he was getting raped by demons and stuff like that. And his friend was looking at him and asking him for help, but he couldn't. There was nothing he could do. And he just had to watch it, and I guess his friend was wondering why. But it was these kinds of things, and it's just, very, very unique a lot of the times to the people that it happens to. So that's mine. Ryan, I guess you can share yours.
Well, I mean, the fear of death. Okay, for me, I guess I fear dying by being buried alive is my greatest fear. But in general, the idea of death terrifies me. The idea that there's somewhere else that I'm going that I got no control over, and just knowing all the different experiences that people have had. And like you said, there's all kinds of pretty average people, who they love their family and they flip the bird to the guy who cuts them off on the street, and they just otherwise live their life without being too good or too bad. And maybe they go to church on Christmas and Easter, and say grace once or twice a month or something, or whatever the case is. They're not horrible people, and then they have these horrible afterlife experiences. And I guess it could be argued one way or the other. Psychology of an individual plays a lot in that and whatnot, but it always concerns me, because I mean, really, I've spent my life delving into the darkest corners and reaches of lore and culture and everything, and not always giving much thought to later down the road. In fact, rarely, if ever, given much thought to down the road. And when in situations like when we were, when we did the podcast with Howard Storm, really enjoyed it. But of course, it's something that forces you to think a little bit more about, a few years down the road. Because we all share something in common. We're all going to die. There's no stopping that. Not yet, anyway.
Well, that's the thing, right? There's no getting off this train.
Yeah.
Everybody's got to go, and there's just no.
So when I'm forced to consider that kind of thing, of course, you inevitably come back to your upbringing and the beliefs that were instilled in you as a child. And for me, I was brought up in a Christian household, and I very much don't consider myself a Christian. I don't really consider myself anything, I guess. and perhaps perhaps that's not people tell me that's not a good way to be. You got to pick a side, and in the past I've let's just say I've played for both teams, and I haven't really taken to either, and sometimes I wonder. I think if there is a pit of fire, according to some people's rules and things that have been written down in books and whatnot, in terms of what sends you where. Well, according to some people, I'm going to the warmer place.
You'll make a nice country ham.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess at least I'll have lots of company, like all the movie, all the movie stars, musicians, the best artists, and
everybody who's had an easy life,
and anybody who's had an interesting, easy life.
Yeah.
I so I guess that's my greatest fear is that. I'm choosing to believe that I'm not going to burn in a pit of flame when I die, but my biggest fear is that I'm wrong.
Okay, so moving on from the more morbid, freaky topic, we were asked, we've been doing this for a couple of years now. We've had our podcast going, and we've been asked, has anything unexpected happen as a result of one of our podcasts? And for me, there's one podcast in particular that had two things happen that was unexpected. So I'll start with the more serious, little bit of a freaky thing that happened, and that is when we did the podcast with Jason Haxton on the Dibbuk box. And anyway, a couple days, or like the day prior, I believe it was the day prior to the interview with Jason. So I had been reading the book. I actually bought it on Kobo as a digital copy.
It was, I believe it was the day that we spoke to him briefly to confirm the podcast.
Yeah, and like we had been reading the book at that point for like a week or something like that, and I was really into it, really into the different things, because it wasn't just what happened to Jason. There was a whole thing with Kevin Mannis and several other people who had the box were kind of skimmed upon in there as well. And anyway, like that day when we like had this brief talk with him, right after that, my mom had this thing happen with her heart called atrial fibrillation, where it doesn't beat properly, and like you're at a very high risk for a stroke and stuff like that when it happens. Never ever had it before. Didn't know what it was at first. Had to rush her to Emerge, and they ended up having to shock her heart and stuff like that. And she actually really didn't take to a lot of things that they were doing. And I remember when we did the podcast, I mentioned it to Jason, and that's when he told me that people who deal with the box or get close to the box, things with the heart and stroke and stuff like that, is like one of the side effects that happens to a lot of people. It's like one of the main things, the precursors or the marks of having been involved with it. And that never ever let up. I mean, my mom still has it. She's had many episodes after the fact, and I've had to take her to Emerge. I've had to take her out to specialists into different cities. So that's something that happened. I mean, perhaps it would have happened anyway, but it's just when you consider the timing of the event and what Jason said, that it makes it all that much more kind of scary to think of. And so much so that when I told a story to my mother-in-law, she likes the paranormal, but she refuses to watch any of our episodes in fear that she'll hear something that will, bring upon some kind of event, similar in that, some kind of a curseful kind of event. So that's one thing that happened. Another thing that happened, and your guess is as good as mine as to whether or not this was the real person involved. But I don't know if many of you people have been to the site abovetopsecret.com. I'm sure some of you have. It's like a forum dedicated to conspiracies and stuff like that. And I used to lurk that board a lot. So on Above Top Secret, I lurked there for many years. Reading more so than posting, but I had a genuine question when we did that episode with Jason Haxton, and I wanted to know what people on that board thought about such and such. And so I posted the question and the video, and just to kind of get people's opinions on what our angle was. And of course, as you know, Ryan, our story was, we came to this conclusion that perhaps Kevin Mannis...
I wouldn't call it a conclusion, but we definitely discussed the possibility.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of things that pointed towards this idea that Kevin Mannis' grandmother kind of, for lack of better terms, if it were all true, could have played a hand in the of the Holocaust or something, which is pretty. It's a pretty damning thing. Anyway,
it's kind of an oversimplification of what we had said, but that's generally how he took it. It was more or less that Kevin Mannis' grandmother was the one who had created the Dibbuk box, and there seemed to be some kind of a link. With an influential Nazi figure who ended up in the United States, and that Jason Haxton had drawn these connections between these Nazis and these families and the box, And we had we discussed the possibility of the box, having, well, I guess that was something that was brought up through his research, was the possibility of the box being involved in the Second World War and the Holocaust. And
yeah, so basically we had a strong angle of why we thought what we thought, and we just put it there, and food for thought, right? Like here's what he said here, and here, and what if, right? And so evidently, this thing came up while it was in the podcast, and I don't know if this was really Kevin Manis or not, or just someone screwing with us, but this guy with that name happens to respond on the thread really, really angry and off put by the whole thing, and like, leave my family alone and this kind of thing. And my immediate reaction was that I couldn't stop laughing because I just the thought that it was really him and that like he came across this thing, was so offended. But the more that he went on, that like we had wronged him in some way. A lot of things that he was saying was that this wasn't said and that wasn't said, and I was like, no, that you did say that. Here, it's in the book. I just read it, and evidently, he was like, well, I wrote part of that book and I read it, so you don't know, blah blah blah. So I ended up taking, of course, as I mentioned, I had a digital copy of the book. I took screenshots of it and put it on like PhotoBucket or something like that, and linked to those things to exact, the exact lines where he literally said certain things, and after that he never replied after, because it was right there in black and white. It was in the book, right? So I always wondered if that really was him or just somebody screwing with me, but I don't know what anyone would have the reason for impersonating someone and genuinely acting upset. But it did give me a good laugh. It was always one of the stranger but kind of funny moments for me when we did that episode. Never thinking that anybody would really even see it, much less someone who was involved in the story to begin with, right? So that's something that happened to me. I believe, Ryan, for you had some stuff happen when we were doing
it was the gin episode, I guess, is the one that I whenever this comes up, it pops into my head. I mean, the whole time that we were doing the research and leading up to doing the podcast originally, because we had set up to do the gin podcast months and months before we actually did it. And I had done a lot of research, read some books, and was getting really into it. And right as we were getting close to that time when we were actually going to do the podcast, I had the string of the most horrible luck that you could possibly imagine. Both of my vehicles broke down in very serious ways. My vehicle and my wife's vehicle. There was just all these little things that came together. Some of them were a little more major than others. Won't get into all the personal details, but needless to say that right around that time, there was a whole plethora of things that just kind of fell apart. And at the same time, a strange kind of, I guess you could term it as a paranormal activity began to ramp up. Now, the place that I live in, both my wife, myself, and my two cats have seen all kinds of things floating around in this place since we've moved in. But it was always very, benign, not a lot to it. Just the shadow of a figure here, a little ball of light zipping through the air over the kitchen table. But right around that time, the activity just went through the roof. A large picture went flying off of the wall in the bedroom one night. In the spare bedroom, my wife and I were in our bed, and the picture is hung, it was very high off the ground. It's a big, heavy picture. It's been there forever. And, of course, we're lying in bed and hear this loud crash, and I jump up, and both of the cats are in the bedroom lying at the foot of the bed. And I go and look in the spare bedroom, and here's this picture sitting at this weird angle, kind of jammed into the seat, like somebody had taken it and shoved it down into the seat. And I thought, well, that's strange. That picture's been up there for almost 2 years, and it's nothing. There's no windows are open, there's no vents or anything around there, and like I said, it's pretty heavy. I went and looked and thought, geez, strange that the string would have busted or the thing would have come out of the wall. And of course, I walk up and look, and the hook is still firmly embedded in the wall, and the string on the back of the picture is still fine, or is fine. So that gave me pause, because just the physics of it. You got a string with a maybe 2-3 pound picture frame with a sheet of glass in it. It's a heavy picture frame with a sheet of glass, and you got this metal wire as the string, and it's sitting in a hook. How the hell does that fall out? How does
Almost
that fall off the wall? It kind of. So I go back to bed, and I'm lying there, and then I'm hearing things moving around, and then as I'm drifting off to sleep, I wake up with the sound of something running around my condo. And I mean, it starts off in the spare bedroom and moves into the bathroom, and then off into the laundry room, and then and seemingly without the sounds are slightly different, but whatever is moving, it doesn't. I don't hear footsteps. I just hear a random collection of very loud, deliberate noises. These weren't slight little tings or a little light knock. And the cats were kind of disturbed by it. They were kind of huddled up by the foot of the bed and looking anxiously towards the door. And this sound continued all the way around until it got out into the living room area, and then it kind of petered off. And again, when we actually did the episode on the gin, which was a couple of months after that, again it's like this activity kicked up again. I have no idea what it is, or if there's actually any
something
connection.
observing.
Yeah, if there's any connection whatsoever, but it's definitely a strange coincidence that the two times that I can't remember exact. Well, there was a couple of extenuating circumstances why we didn't do the podcast the first time around. Some of them being directly related to the fact that I had to find a way to repair 2 vehicles that were in severe states of damage, and the stress that comes with that. I live in a big city. I can't afford to not have a vehicle, and it certainly did feel like something was interfering.
So there you have it. That's the 2 episodes that affected the both of us. Another question we get, I guess, within the content that we cover, one has to bring a certain amount of skepticism and a certain amount of being open-minded. And so, we've been asked, if we have trouble determining fact from fiction. And, really, it doesn't matter, because for us, it doesn't matter if we believe it. We've had shows where things that happened that we discussed, we might not necessarily believe in it, but we're not going to come out and tell you that we don't believe in it, because that's not really the point. Just because we don't believe in something doesn't mean that it isn't true. And really, our goal is to just provide what we find so that you can make up your own mind. whether you believe in something.
That being said, skepticism, what it entails in a lot of cases is not actual skepticism. What people talk about, if you believe that something is a certain way, if you don't believe in ghosts because God would never allow ghosts, then that's fine. But that's not skepticism. That's a belief that you hold that overrides the existence of another belief. And for myself, anyway, personally, I always like to take the philosophy that I believe in no one thing, but I allow for the possibility of all things. And while I may be, I may not necessarily believe in certain things or believe that it's likely. I don't think there's anything that I say that I just don't believe in that. I can't believe in that because for me, all the years I've been studying the paranormal and conspiracies and extraterrestrials and that kind of thing, there doesn't seem to be any rules. There doesn't seem to be any limits, and every time somebody can just make something up, like the Slender Man, right? I mean, that was an internet sensation, the Slender Man, and then all of a sudden people start reporting seeing the Slender Man, right? And so at what point does reality become fantasy, or what point does fantasy sometimes become reality? Is that a possibility? And then that gets into the tulpas, the thought forms and whatnot. But it's definitely a great question. We're never going to intentionally mislead anybody with something that's definitely false, a falsehood. We're not going to report on a hoax and try and make it seem like it's real. But to take any one point and say aliens are actually demons, or there's no such thing as demons and angels, it's all mistaken extraterrestrials from either standpoint makes the other one invalid, and I don't think that's there's no place for that in paranormal study.
No, and I think when it comes to these kinds of where our thresholds are as in terms of how far we're willing to believe in something or allow for something to exist. We all have a threshold. Like, there's certain things that my brain won't ever allow me to believe in. Like, when people are like, I've been sent by God and I have special powers, and I've been sent lots of stuff like that, and any paranormal place you ever go on the internet are going to have things like that. My brain will never let me, even if it was true, my brain will never let me believe that, because it just, to me, my threshold is way the opposite direction of believing in something. You know what I mean? Like, I can't help it. Like, I have a threshold that that's way off something that I could believe. In fact, it kind of ties into the next question.
I was just going to say that, and that brings us to number 6.
Yeah, because the subject matter, because of what we deal in, you have ghosts, you have demons and stuff like that, you get a very, very wide, gamut of, ends of the spectrum of, like, okay, well, I have a haunting, to crazy things that other people might say. There's no happy medium. It's like, there's small things, there's subtle things, and then there's just batshit crazy stuff. And so somebody asked, what's the strangest thing that anyone has ever sent us? And for me,
I know what your favorite one is.
This one cracked me up when I first read it, and it's not that I mean to laugh. It was just that it was so off the wall. I'm just checking my email, seeing what I got, and this guy had persuaded. He basically said that he was the reincarnation of Hitler, and that was revealed to him by the reincarnation of Leonardo da Vinci. Just like, I'm just thinking, like, here's two people that are like batshit crazy, kind of.
And it was right in the middle. It was right in the middle of this. The thing that got me is it was he stated that so matter of factly right in the middle of this write up that he had sent us. And it was, that wasn't even what he was talking about. He was telling us something else. He was like, well, this is what's going to happen, blah, 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 the extraterrestrials, the demons, the angels, blah, 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 blah. And I know this because I am the reincarnation of Hitler, and I know I'm the reincarnation of Hitler because I was told that by the reincarnation of Leonardo da Vinci. So with that in mind, we'll just, and it was just so matter of fact. That you can't help but laugh.
Oh Jesus! Yeah, that threw me for a loop when I read it, and it ended up becoming one of my favorite submissions, just because it was so out to lunch, right? But that's an example of something that just goes way, way beyond my threshold, like, way too far for something that I could accept. I mean, for one person to say that they're the reincarnation of something, that's already, is going to be few people that can buy into that. But then to say that, that was revealed to you by someone else who was reincarnated by someone, it was just a bit much, right? So that's the strangest thing I think that we got.
I think personally, for me, whenever we get contacted by people claiming to have special contact with angels or with God, I think that pushes my incredulous button a little too far. I don't necessarily believe in a supreme deity, but again, I allow for the existence. I leave space there for a supreme entity, and if one does exist, I find it highly suspect that he or she or it would contact specific individuals and send them on specific missions. It just seems a little too, I'd have an easier time believing that, the extraterrestrials greys are us from the future, sent from an alternate timeline to come back here and try to fix our genetics so that we don't end up like them. And, some ridiculous storyline like that is easier for me to believe than when somebody emails me and tells me that they are, the new incarnation of God, Jesus risen, or the Maitreya, or the Buddha.
Well, the thing is, besides just the outlandishness of it, is that if it were true, and that had happened, you'd think it would be more rare. But any paranormal site I go on, there's like 100 people that are on these God missions, and I just like you, I can't buy, like, even if it's true, my brain will not allow me to.
And I can't believe that if Jesus were to come back tomorrow, that I'd be one of the first people he would email.
Oh, me either. Me either.
I just
and I would also expect that they probably wouldn't use email. Like if I were to come back, and I was special in some way, I'm sure I could demonstrate that by, like, using telepathy or some kind of magic that a regular person can't use. You know what I mean?
We would come to find out that email is actually much faster than telepathy. It costs less.
Yeah. So yeah, that's those two questions are kind of linked together, I guess, in that way. So one of the other interesting questions that we've gotten is, what's our opinion on the ancient astronaut theory? And it's such a broad topic. I mean, the show Ancient Aliens. I mean, that's the show, right? It's this. That's how broad it is. They made a show out of it, and they have seasons of it. So I will, I mean, obviously we're not going to be able to go into depths like that, but I will say that they make a lot of good cases on that show. I mean, even Renaissance paintings and carvings in stone walls like thousands of years ago have depict spaceships, or UFOs, aliens, different beings, and like different kinds of messages that I mean, they're a mirror for some of this stuff. I mean, a flat out UFO in a painting. I remember seeing that was one of the in one of the paintings. And I mean, 1,000 years ago, and it looks exactly the way that we depict them today.
Like a bang-on flying saucer with a ray of light coming out of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's too exact. I mean, so for me, I mean, it's not even a question. I definitely do think that they were here before, and in fact, there's a lot of parallelisms in commercial media that points to interesting points, like the movie Knowing, and a lot of people were I don't know if they were offended. There was like some backlash about this part in the end, and if you haven't seen the movie, don't want it to be spoiled, just don't listen to this part. But basically, the aliens come, and they when they descend from their ship to take this boy and girl up, they were taking them away from the earth because it was the end of the earth, and they came down and they shone like the light and everything shone on them. They looked like they had wings. They looked like angels, right? And then they carried up the boy and girl, and then they showed them running towards this tree, and it looked, kind of depicted a symbolism towards Adam and Eve. And the question remains that if we were back 2,000 years ago, and you did see some alien creature, and they came in a flying ship, would we not think, what would we call them? We probably wouldn't call them aliens. Maybe angels were the name that they gave to them. If they heard a voice speaking from the sky, it makes sense that they would call that voice God. Do you know what I mean? Like you could see where they would think these kinds of things. So a lot of what we interpret from religion in some circumstances were interpretations of like alien beings or things like that, and the only way they could express it was to like maybe they didn't have wings, but they flew, and well, how would they draw that to depict it so that their culture could understand it? Well, let's put wings on them, because we know that birds on our planet have wings, and that's how they fly. Right, so
the metaphorical, a literal drawing to act as a metaphor. They draw literal wings to indicate that these are flying beings. The idea of taking spiritualism, religion, and turning it into science fiction is what we're. That's the basis of the ancient alien theory, the ancient astronaut theory. And I mean, when we look at the lore, we look at from every corner of the planet, the creation stories all over Asia, the creation stories all over parts of Europe, the creation stories all over Africa. You have everyone from the Dogon tribe with their worship of the binary star system. You have the celestial alignments done by the Druids with the megalithic stones all over Europe. We have the pyramids and in Egypt, the ziggurats in Mexico, and it all seems to bespeak some kind of a connection to the sky. And in modern day, we look at a lot of what cutting-edge physicists are saying about our world. What are they talking about? They're talking about stuff like quantum entangled particles, particles that are able to send messages over an infinite amount of distance instantaneously, with no what they call a communicator particle. There's no actual physical communication, like a beam of light going from one place to another to give you a signal. It's simply something happens here and it happens over there at the same time instantaneously. So we're moving outside of physical space, and I mean that essentially is what spiritualism has been for all time. It's spiritualism is dealing with things outside of our physical space, and outside of our natural laws, whether those be spiritual beings or spiritual places, the dreamland, the spirit land, the afterlife. Now we have actual language for that in our science, and it's easy to draw that line and keep going and say, okay, well, our science is saying that multiple dimensions are reality, or at least are mathematically feasible. And then we go back and look at stuff like the Rig Veda and the Bhagavad Gita, where it talks about higher realms and other dimensions, and it's almost you read some of the Vedic texts, and to me it's quantum physics written by a poet. And when I sit back and I'm forced to consider some of these things, the idea that extraterrestrials or beings from another reality or another planet, if they are a couple of 100,000 or let's say 1 million years ahead of us, it's very easy to come to the conclusion that it's possible for them to get here back during that time, and it's possible that our ancestors had interpreted the things that they've seen these people or beings doing as magical, where in reality it was technological. And maybe it's a mixture of the two. Perhaps spiritual / interdimensional beings coming here and using a mixture of technology and spiritualism to achieve fantastic things. Again, we run into this situation where to believe in any one of these things would be to make its opposite impossible, and there's nothing that's impossible.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to the topic of aliens and other life and stuff, a lot of people they jump on science and they say, well, scientists haven't shown this, they haven't shown that, but really, is it really that hard to believe that we are in our infancy of what we know about the universe in comparison to other planets that have life and things like that? Like, I mean, we're just discovering as we're going. I mean, look how much happened in the last 100 years for us.
Our furthest device, the furthest man-made device ever sent from this planet, has only just left our solar system.
So there you go. I mean,
right? I mean, we can look out, right? But what does, I mean, if you sat up on a hill and you watched a city milling about down below you, I mean, what information could you really gather about that city watching it from a hill where people were tiny as ants and just zipping around their little city? I mean, sure, you'd be able to come up with all kinds of theories about where the ants go and what the ants do, but you'd have no information. Right now, that's all we have information on is our observations.
Basically, we're very ignorant, despite how advanced we like to think of ourselves. And I think science is great, and I think it should be continuously. We need it, but to assume that we have all the answers now is just ridiculous. We're really just children in the in the universe. And speaking of aliens, that was another question we got. Is have we ever seen UFOs or aliens? Yes and no for me. I did see a UFO. I'd never ever seen an alien, but I did see when I was living in this small town. I was working as a waiter at a pizza place during the summer of when I was going to school, and it was probably 3 in the morning, and it's a small town anyway. So like when it was nighttime, you could hear a pin drop in the city. Like I mean, it just was that quiet, and I had noticed I had done a year of my school at that point, and there's an airport out there, but it was never open that whole year that I was there. And that night, a plane it was a plane like came over our apartment building, and I mean it must have been really really close, because it literally shook our room. And it was very very loud. And I jumped up to look out because it just, it was just very unusual. And, it was a plane. I saw it land in the airport, and like these emergency lights went up and stuff like that. And there wasn't anything paranormal about that, but it was unusual. So I woke my wife up, and, I told her about it, and she got up, and we were kind of looking out the window because you could see it from my, bedroom window. And we watched this thing for, it was probably a half an hour, because really what we ended up doing is just kind of having a discussion about it, in the window. And the engines were still going, and you could hear it. It was really loud. And the airport wasn't particularly far away from where we lived. And after about a half an hour, they shut off the engine. And it was very, very noticeable how quiet it once again, became. And we just kind of stood there talking for a little longer, and then this device with 3 lights on it, I thought it was a helicopter, and I can't even tell you with certainty what color the lights were at this point. I just know that they were different colors. And it came over and it hovered over the airport. And I honestly just thought it was a helicopter. I didn't know what kind, or I couldn't see any shape. It was just lights. And, me and my wife began to discuss what we thought it was and why it had come over. Like, I mean, it was hovering over the airport. And then it stayed there for a little bit. And then when it left, it kind of came like it was going to the left of my field of vision, gradually getting to where I thought it was going to escape from where I could see it through my window on that angle. And after it got so far, it shot like straight up in the air. Like you could see it go right up and gone in like a fraction, like it was like a second. And that's when me and my wife were like, oh my God, what is this thing and stuff like that. And usually she's the skeptic. I'm the one that's into this stuff. And I was trying to rationalize it, and she was saying it was a UFO. And I don't even remember if it was that night or the next day. It dawned on me that there was no sound. There was not any sound. I mean, you could hear a pin drop. I mean, you would have heard a helicopter, but there was no sound whatsoever with this flying thing. So that, I believe, was a UFO. I also saw strange lights up in a part of my city where I live now. I'd gone to McDonald's with a couple of buddies, and we drove up on this hill. And at the time I smoked. I don't smoke anymore. We got out, and we were leaning up against the car. Or I was leaning up against the car. They were kind of standing around. We were all kind of chatting or whatever. And I looked up in the sky, and I saw what looked like a pulse of orange fire or light shoot with a trajectory that seemed to travel, the circular shape of, I guess, our Earth or sky. It had that kind of shape, but the trajectory was like from my right to my left in a horizontal kind of way that went over the mountain in my immediate opposite direction. And I was freaking out. I was telling my friends, like, oh my God, this thing in the sky, and they didn't believe me. And I never, thought I would be so lucky, but then they were looking and it happened again. And this kept happening, every so many, I don't know if it was a minute or 30 seconds or whatever. And the trajectory gradually changed so that it was ever so slightly turning and going behind the mountain. Like you'd see it start on the other side of the mountain and then go behind it. And we ended up chasing this thing by driving up the highway, like in between the mountains, to follow it to see where it went. And this went right into the nighttime to the point where the light changed from orange to blue. And I mean, it was a couple of hours before it finally changed into, like it just faded away. It was a slow fade into nothing over the period of hours. And I never ever did figure out what that was. I mean, I've seen meteor showers. I've seen all kinds of things like that. But this was unlike anything I've ever seen. And I still, to this day, don't know what it was. So that is the extent, I think. That's the most memorable things that I've seen in the sky. What about you, Ryan?
Well, I guess one of the most memorable lights in the sky experience, and again, we're talking UFOs, so it's an unidentified flying object. Now, I will say flat out, I have never seen an extraterrestrial, to my knowledge, anyways. According to some, they walk by you every day, but personally, my most pivotal experience, I think, I was quite a bit younger, probably around 16, 17, around that age. And my girlfriend and I, my current wife, we were sitting on a beach. We were at a campfire, and we had left the main group of people and had driven down the beach on a ATV. We had stopped, and we were just sitting on the beach. It was the sun had just gone down. The twilight was just fading away, and I began. There was all these stars, a smattering of stars in the sky, on the other side of the lake, and on the other side of the lake was this big hill, and it's a big lake, a very big lake. And then there's a forested hill on the other side of the lake, and way up above that, like way up above that, I could see these twinkling stars. And we were just sitting there, talking, enjoying each other's company, and looking at the stars. And I was remarking on how they seemed to be twinkling and flashing all these different colors, and they were going red and green and blue and yellow and white and purple and orange and every color in between. And it would, they were all flashing all these different colors, but they were really small and far off. And I was pretty confident that they were stars. That is until one by one. And I mean, I'm talking about, this is a cluster of, probably like anywhere between 30 and 40 stars. And one by one, they started drifting down. And at first, I was shocked. I sat there just stunned, and I watched one, then two, then three, then four, and they weren't coming down in any particular pattern. I mean, I'd been watching these stars, quote unquote stars, for the better part of 45 minutes or so, and then just without warning, they began dropping out of the sky, and it wasn't straight down. It wasn't anything like that. It almost looked like they fluttered. They had a slight side-to-side movement. They would drift down a little bit, then drift over to the side, then drift back to the other side. Some of them seemed to drift back up a ways before beginning drifting back down again. And we sat there for a half an hour and watched light after light after light come. I mean, if it was UFOs, if these were actual objects, it was a flippin' fleet of them. And just we were just transfixed. Now this is back before the era of everybody has a cell phone. So we were sitting there transfixed and kind of not arguing, but debating whether or not we should drive back and get more people to see this. And after watching it for about a half an hour or so, finally we said, geez, this isn't stopping. We got to go and get some people. And we did. But of course, like all things, by the time the bulk of the people had got there, by the time we had convinced everybody that we weren't being ridiculous and that we were actually seeing what we were seeing, a couple of people had got there before the rest of the group, and they had seen what we were talking about, and but only a few. They only seen a handful. And I guess what was the biggest impact for me was just the sheer number of them. So that area where we were is actually not too far away from an airport. So the next morning, I actually called the local airport and I asked them if they had if there was an air show or if there was an increase in traffic. And a whole slew of questions, and it wasn't until finally they asked me why I was calling, and I said, well, and I described the area that they were coming from, the direction, and I said, do you have many approaches coming from that direction? And they say, no, that's not part of our regular flight paths. It's it was actually at 90 degrees to the majority of the flight paths, because most of them come into the airport from the east or the west and take off going east or west, and very few go north or south. That I seen it coming from the from the northeast, traveling southwest was kind of the direction, which is and more going more north south than a little bit later as they traveled. And they assured me that there was nothing like that in the area. And finally, the guy asked me why, what all the questions were about. And of course, I said, well, I was out, and then I described the area to him, and so I was looking out over the area, and I seen probably 30 or 40 or more bright twinkling lights that got brighter as they got closer, that sat stationary in the sky for probably 45 minutes to an hour, and then over the course of a half an hour they all drifted down, and that was the thing, was this area that I was sitting there, I was looking at, was just filled with stars. And then in 30 minutes, there was no stars.
Well,
there was just a few. There was like one or two that obviously were actual stars, and then everything else was whatever it was that I had seen.
Yeah. So, we both saw some pretty messed up stuff in the sky. So, with that said, let's move on to the. We got two more questions here. We're gonna have to call it a night. So one of these is one that we get a lot, is, why don't we record actual shows, with video, rather than just podcasts? And truthfully, the show, it was never really meant to go beyond a podcast anyway. The way this all started, and a lot of people tend to think that there's a budget here or something like that, but there really isn't. It just tended to have higher production values, and I'll explain why that is. It wasn't intentionally for the show; it was just circumstance. Basically, I was doing a web development course, and Ryan and I have stayed friends since he moved away years ago. And when we would talk, we kept in touch, and when we would talk, we would often talk about paranormal topics. We're both fans of it, both into it. So we would kind of, I found this, and that was our conversation. So when I started my web development course, I had to make a website for something. So I decided to make it on the paranormal because I enjoy it, and I got to thinking one day. I was just talking to Ryan on the phone. We were having one of these conversations, and I thought, this could be a show. It's just what we're talking about right now on the phone. Like, it's just, we'll record it and let people be a fly on the wall during our conversation. That's all it was ever going to be. So that's what we started with. That was just an extension of the website that became the most important part. Accidentally. It was never the focal point. It just happened to become popular. And so we recorded these shows, and the reason why the audio quality and stuff like that, at least in the beginning, I don't know if you can notice a difference now. I just sold my $3,000 preamps, but I'm still using an $1,800 sound card, so it should still be sufficient. But anyway, I had all this really expensive studio equipment because I used to be a recording artist and signed to a label. So I had that already, and I just used it for our podcast and the video and stuff. I had experience with that, and using various video editing software like Adobe Premiere and different plugins and such. So I could whip up a little intro and stuff. And so a lot of people, have referenced it as a radio show or
mistakenly assume that we have investors and money and that we're a big radio show, and then they wonder why things aren't a certain way.
Or if you hear typing, or you hear a phone do something or whatever. And the truth is that I've since we've started the show, I've jerry-rigged a few pieces of equipment together in my bedroom rather than what used to be a studio. Ryan just picked up a decent mic for like a couple $100. And all the show was just, again, we'd pick a topic and discuss it. We're not actual researchers. We're just fans of it. And basically the show is just us talking about what we found and giving our point of view, and you guys just get to listen to it. And for some reason, a lot of people seem to like it. So that's all it is. There's nothing. There isn't a budget. There isn't anything special in that way.
There's no backers. There's no investors. For those of us, or for those of you who accuse us of not being professional, we're not.
Yeah,
we of course we try to do a good quality program. We very much enjoy the reception that we got to this.
Yeah, and more so now. I mean, in the beginning there was no note taking or anything like that. Even it was just wing it, because it was never it's just once we started doing it and people start to like it and have expectations, we put a little bit more effort into it. But it's still not, again, it's not like something that we go out of our way to do. It's something that we do when we get a bit of free time. We still work, on related jobs and stuff like that. So, yeah.
And bearing in mind that we live on opposite sides of the country from one another, so it's not always easy to coordinate our schedules.
Yeah, and so, while I'd love to do an actual show, go out and actually videotape going somewhere out into the field, it's just not something. We don't have the time, money, or opportunity to do that. As much as I'd love to be able to do it, we're just not in a situation where we can.
Perhaps one day.
Yes, perhaps. Well, if you guys start to flood one of us with money, we'll we'll look at
buying some
like
video
that.
equipment.
Yeah,
and plane tickets.
Yeah. So, on to our last question for the night, I guess. And it is a good question, is what do you think happens when we die? And so this is very much a guess on my part, because nobody knows. That's why it's terrifying. What do I think happens when we die? Well, one of the things that evidently comes up a lot when we talk about dying, is what happens to the soul. Where do we go? And another thing that seems to come up, and this is coming up, I think it even came up with our interview with Howard Storm, and he's a Christian, he's a pastor, and this comes up in other paranormal angles as well, is the idea that different species, or I should say beings, or whatever you want to call them, entities, we all have a soul, and it resonates at a certain frequency, much in like how if you saw old cartoons where someone screams and the glass breaks, the idea being that they hit a note that of a frequency that was the same frequency of the glass that it existed at, and because of that, it actually made physical contact and broke it.
Makes a sympathetic vibration.
Yeah, so basically the idea being that there are many different dimensions from where we are, and different beings of different frequencies reside in different dimensions. So there are lower vibrational beings, which are usually referred to as more evil or malevolent beings. They're supposedly a lower vibrational entities, and for better, or I guess nicer or more positive entities, it's a higher vibrational being, and there's all these like different, many multi-tiered layers in between. So when we die, while we're here on Earth, we learn and we experience and we gain perspective, and I think the body is basically an opportunity. It's a vessel for us to learn, to get perspective, so that we can build on that spiritual energy. We basically can change it through learning, through experiencing, depending on the actions and the things that we do. And once we die and we're released from this vessel, whatever vibrational frequency that we now reside at, I think we just tend to go in that where we vibrate with. We're drawn to where we most closely resonate with. So I think that's where the idea, if you're a bad person, you're going to go to a lower vibrational place that's probably more negative. Whereas if you're better, if you've been a good person, your vibration will be higher, and you'll go to a higher, more positive vibrational place. And again, I don't think that it's just one up and one down. I think there's many layers, and it tends to be like, if you look at people who talk about possession and different people in that realm of thought, it's that life is such a gift. It's always considered a gift, something that we're lucky to have, an opportunity. Demons want to possess us because they want life, and things of that nature. So the idea is being that when we're here, it's an opportunity. Like, people really want the opportunity. And a lot of us, I don't think, realize or think of it as an opportunity. There's people that take their lives. They don't want to be here because it's terrible. But I think the idea being that you can't actually evolve your spirit unless you're in this vessel. And I think the vessel is kind of a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like you get amnesia. It's like the whole idea, you're coming here and you don't know anything because you have to experience it. It's not just hearing about it and knowing about it. You have to experience it for the first time to gain perspective. Like, you have to live through different hardships and stuff like that to get perspective. You can't just have it handed to you. And I mean, in Greek mythology and stuff like that, they spoke of like Lethe River, and the idea being that when you drank from the river, you got amnesia. And again, the same kind of idea is that you needed that to gain perspective. And when you die, it's like a lot of people say when they have near-death experiences and stuff, it's like all of this stuff comes flooding back to them. that they never knew when they were alive. And they suddenly feel guilty for things they did that they didn't in life because of their personalities or outlooks, or deep regret because they didn't take advantage of the life that they've been given, and stuff like that. So, it's what I think we probably even choose what it is that we want to learn before we come here. And, we pick our hardships because we know we need to have it in order to learn and to evolve. And once we die and we go back and it all comes flooding back to us, we hope that we had, accomplished our missions, that we can move up, and perhaps we'll come back again, not necessarily to this earth, but to another world somewhere where we now resonate a little higher or lower, so that we can learn again and move up that chain until eventually we get to the top, wherever that may be. So that's what I think happens when we die. I think that's the point of it. And I think one of the things that comes into to question more often than not is intent. The intent of the actions you do. So if you're someone who does a lot of good deeds, but you don't, you do them because it's good, it makes you look good. It's, you do them because you think it's going to buy your way into heaven. I would think of as a selfish intent, in comparison to someone who would just do good things for somebody else because they're doing something for somebody else. And intent is what I've been hearing from a lot of different people is the main ingredient that determines, whether we're doing good or bad. So the funny thing about it, when we determine, freedom, our freedom to choose, is that, are we really free? Because given my personality and where I've been raised and my surroundings, my experience, I'm not sure I would make any different decisions. I am who I am because of where I am. And while I think I'm making choices, I'm sure that in the same circumstance, with the same knowledge and the same everything, I would probably make the same choice every time. So in regards to intent, I do make selfish decisions, but I'm not sure I could, if I did change that and made an unselfish decision because I thought, I was trying to not be selfish, am I being selfish at the same time because I think I'm doing it to help myself in some way? You know what I mean? Like,
are you in fact damned to no matter what you do, just by virtue of you can't help the fact that you're an asshole? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, basically,
I was born an asshole. There's no stopping it. I can't do anything about it. This train is on the asshole tracks.
Yeah, that's right, because you think about it. I mean, if you want to dumb it down to a really simple scenario, here's you're put in a situation where you could steal $100,000. You knew you wouldn't be caught. No one would be hurt from it, but it's wrong. Would you do it? I probably would fucking do it. If it wasn't going to hurt anybody, I knew I wasn't going to get caught. If I didn't do it, I can't picture myself not doing it. I mean, what about you? I mean,
we're talking about what, a bag of money on the side of the road, got a bank sticker on it. The insurance company of the bank is going to cover it. Fell off the truck. There's nobody around. No chance of getting caught. Yeah, for sure.
And I think everybody would. Most people would do it. And if they didn't, I would think it's because they were worried that they would feel guilty for it, or something like that. And or they were committing some kind of sin, but just by not doing it because of that, again, it's like it's like, well,
catch-22. Am I only doing it? Am I only not doing it because God is watching?
Yeah. So I think in terms of that decision, no matter how I found my way into that again, I would probably make the same decision every time. So that intent, that choice I think I'm making, is it really a choice? Or is it just a percentage? Is a likelihood that, put in this scenario, given this person's experience, his personality, his whatever, he's going to make this decision. It's like, that's the algorithm, put in that situation, given point A, B, and C, and D, they're always going to make this decision. So all these times that we think we have freedom of choice, it's a point that I often wonder, like, is it really freedom, or is it just because you think you have freedom, but you're always going to make, like, someone who's really aggressive, and you piss them off, they're going to punch you in the face. That's part of their build. They're aggressive. Do you know what I mean? It's just that scenario. It's going to happen like that every single time. Does that make the person wrong? Do you know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah, well, I guess it's the old argument between, or the old story, I should say, of the scorpion riding on the back of the duck, and the duck says, "Why?
I love that.
Why did you sting me?" And he's like, "Well, I'm a scorpion. What did you expect me to do?
My nature.
It's my nature. Is what I do." But I guess the argument against that would be the idea that, well, we're not animals, we're people, and we do have a choice, and the aggressive guy can choose to not punch somebody in the face, and then is that intention to say, okay, well, you know what, I'm not going to punch this guy in the face because I don't want to get in trouble with the police, or I don't want to get in trouble with my congregation. The other churchgoers aren't going to like the fact that I punch the meter maid in the face or something. It's perhaps it's a matter of intention, or perhaps it's a matter of actions. For me personally, the idea of the afterlife and what happens to us after death, I guess, I draw a lot of my pseudo beliefs, because again, I don't believe in any one thing. As my cat tries to knock over the microphone here. But I draw a lot of my inspiration from science, or from the natural world, and from what I can tell from science is that matter and energy, and in that sense, information, while matter and energy is never created or destroyed, it's there was one point of creation for matter and energy, and it's existed ever since then, and just keeps getting changed from one form to another. So, all of the experiences and all of the little ephemeral minutia that make up my being, all the little bits and pieces that make me up, are they gone when I die? Does it just dissipate? Does that organization, does all the information that's been organized into my being, does that just dissipate into just a chaotic fuzz when my body expires? I don't think so. I tend to believe that like nature has cycles for everything. We see that no matter where we look, we see these carbon, oxygen, nitrogen cycles that are so complex and convoluted. They involve chemistry and geology and biology, plants trapping carbon and that being dragged deep under the earth by tectonic pressure or forces of subduction, pulling the carbon deep underground, and then it being released at a later date. There seems to be all these very advanced or very complex cycles that exist in nature, that go right out into the universe, and right down to single-celled organisms, and everything seems not necessarily ordered, but everything seems to have a place within these cycles. We see popping, these systems of recycling, of rebirth and renewal and rejuvenation, popping up over and over and over again, and there's nothing ever wasted. Carbon becomes a living organism that creates other things, and then that that organism dies, and that carbon goes back into the ground, and the subductive tectonic forces drag it deep under the earth, and it becomes oil, or it turns into a diamond, and that diamond is used to create tools souls. There's all these different incarnations of the bits and pieces that make us up physically. And I tend to believe that the afterlife is just an extension of the here life. That whatever force, whatever prime mover, whatever first massive creative force started spinning and churning away this engine of creation that created the universe, that imprint, whatever structure that makes that up, I think has left a mark on us. It's left some sort of impression, and that impression, that mark, creates life and creates organized systems everywhere we look. And I think that extends into the afterlife as well. And there's probably a whole ecosystem that revolves around the moving of information from the material world to other worlds, and that migration of information to the afterlife is probably what that that part of the ecosystem is all about. Is probably just as natural as the life and death and growth of a forest and all of the different intricate systems that are involved in that over the course of hundreds of thousands of years. Is probably no different than the process of information and experiences that are brought into the next world from this world as kind of this kind of a system that is able to take organized information and move it into the next world and change it into a different form, and eventually it probably comes back again. It's that information, that's the contact that we have with otherworldly beings. These feedback loops get created, and the system builds on itself, and perhaps it's a system that's still evolving. Perhaps it's something that is always changing and always growing, and the unknowable nature of the afterlife is unknowable because it's such a fluid situation. It changes all the time. There's more going on than we could ever imagine, I think.
So basically, to sum up everything you just said, you could come back as the reincarnation of Hitler, and I could
and you can come back as the reincarnation of Leonardo da Vinci and tell me all about who I am.
I think that's what Ryan was trying to say.
Well, I think with that, I think that concludes our list of questions here.
Yeah, so that's our episode for tonight. If you guys, Jesus Christ, if you guys got any questions you'd like to ask us or anything,
if anyone out there has any questions they'd like to ask us or emails they'd like to send, please contact us at Ryan@effedupstories.com or Will@effedupstories.com. That's EFFEDSTORIES.com. Even if you just have a question, comment, anything at all, drop us a line. Thanks so much, everybody.